Hey there, Mr. Redder here. Welcome back to another episode of r/Entitled People Stories. Our first story we'll be reading today. Rich Karen goes bankrupt from crypto and expects sympathy from me. After that, am I the jerk for siding with my sister's ex regarding her past? And after that, am I the jerk for wanting my daughter to meet my girlfriend despite being an absent father? Now for every thumbs up this video gets, one Karen goes bankrupt. Never gonna happen to me, Reddit boy. I keep everything in cold storage. Not your keys, not your crypto. So please smash that like button and subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. Rich Karen goes bankrupt from crypto and expects sympathy from me. I, 30 male, come from a very poor family, but my wife is from a very rich one. She started off the marriage with a net worth of $31 million, and I started it off with $300,000 in student debt. When we got married, she made me get a prenup that separated her inheritance and got rid of my right to an elective share to it if she dies. In other words, I renounced my spousal right to a third of her separate property if she dies, making her sole beneficiaries her siblings or potential kids. My debt and our incomes were also separated. We both got lawyers, hers was much more expensive than mine, and notarized the prenup. None of this was a problem for me. As a man, I'm determined to pull myself up by the bootstraps, not rely on my wife's wealth for anything. The only beneficial part of the prenup for me was that our incomes were also now separate, and I earned a somewhat higher income than her, and so I was okay with it overall. 5 years later, I still don't have a seventh of her current wealth, but her investments haven't been doing great this year either. As a sole crypto investor, things have been going really poorly for her. I had warned her not to do this, but she invests in a cryptocurrency called Monero, which is down 47% this year. About 5% of her money was not in her wallet and was in the FTX exchange itself, which she lost after FTX went bankrupt recently. She now has a net worth of around $18 million. I don't invest in crypto, but rather in index funds. They've taken a hit this year as well, but based on historical performance, they should go back up eventually. No such guarantee for crypto, and certainly not for Monero. I come home to her crying the other day after she found out that FTX went bankrupt. I told her, that's rough. Not in a sarcastic way, and I went upstairs to change. When I got back downstairs, she started going off on me and complaining, talking about how nonchalant I was about her losing money. I pointed out that she's still extraordinarily rich in spite of her poor choices, and that she could stop investing in crypto at any time if she wanted to. Besides, she was the one that wanted to separate everything, so why does she want to make it my problem all of a sudden? Am I the jerk? I don't understand why having separate finances would stop you from being able to comfort her. If my partner said they dropped $20 down a drain pipe, I'd have more sympathy for him than you showed your wife who lost a considerable amount of money. I get she has more, but it still sucks, and I don't see why you couldn't sympathize with her. She didn't ask you for money or ask you to solve her problems. She just asked you to care that your wife is having problems. You're the jerk. The whole backstory doesn't matter. You agreed to it. You say yourself you felt fine with having separate finances, so it's unrelated. And what you're actually asking is, am I the jerk for not listening to or supporting my wife when she was upset? Unless, of course, you're holding a grudge over the finances are kind of happy to see her fail. But I would think she married you for support, love, and friendship since it wasn't for money. You aren't providing that. Her financial choices weren't smart, but many of us middle-class folks lose money and still get love and support. And if you're feeling burned by the prenup, I think you signed on for that, as one-sided as it is. You're the jerk. You're the jerk. I'm genuinely baffled by these posts on here that are like, the person who's supposed to be my partner was going through something upsetting, and I was casually cruel about it, and now they're upset, and why is this my problem? It's your problem because she's your wife, expecting some kind of empathy from you. Note that she wasn't even asking you to somehow cover the losses, just to not be a total jerk about the fact that she's lost money. Isn't a wildly unreasonable expectation from a spouse. Not the jerk. Let's reverse the roles. Rich man worth $31 million marries a woman with $300,000 in debt, makes her get a prenup that prevents her from getting anything when he passes on. Man invests way too much into a high-risk investment. Man loses everything and cries to his wife about it. Is Reddit really going to tell her she's wrong to tell him, that's rough, and walk away? Heck no. Reddit is going to tell her it's his fault he lost everything and that she needs to leave him. The hypocrisy on this site never ceases to amaze me. Normally, I don't engage with idiots who feel the need to say things like, "But what if the roles were reversed?" But since I'm a woman who's been in a similar situation to the wife in this story, allow me to set you straight very quickly. The reason we on Reddit judge the OP differently, based on whether they're a male or a female, is because after the literal thousands of years of you guys treating us like dirt, it's time for payback, like long overdue. Many won't admit this, but the truth is, you guys deserve to be judged differently than we do, because it adds a little slice of fairness to the world. Don't like it? Grow up and deal with it. Blame your ancestors for treating us like second-class citizens for the last, 10,000 years. Oh, but we were fighting wars, hunting for food, and building crap. Yeah, sure you were. While we were the ones doing the real work of raising kids, which even to this day, you're still unable to do. Why do you think courts give custody to the mothers 90% of the time? Because we're the ones who are actually fit to be parents. Why do you think we get alimony? Because we deserve it and you don't. So next time you even think about leaving a "what if the roles were reversed" comment, I want you to remember what I said and ask yourself, what if the reason we get judged differently is because we deserve to be? Which you do. It's 2022. If you're a dude, then let's face it, there's a 90% chance you're not worth anyone's time.
Well, don't you sound like a happy, pleasant person to be around?
Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his wife? Please let us know.
That's one of the reasons I'm glad you're broke, Reddit boy. You don't have money to do stupid things with and lose it.
Am I the jerk for siding with my sister's ex regarding her past? As a kid, I always looked up to my older sister because she was so cool, pretty, and the popular girl. I always tried to be like her, dressed like her, listen to her music, you get the idea. I was popular the first time I stepped through the high school door because I was basically a copy of her. I was overwhelmed by the attention, but quickly found out she was mostly popular with only the guys. She dated many of the guys in our high school, and they thought that I would too. I was so embarrassed. I had our mom take me out to buy new clothes and everything. Whatever she did, I went the opposite way. She wore tons of makeup, I wore none. She listened to a certain type of music, I didn't. We went to different colleges. Fast forward to now. Sis must have figured out her lifestyle wasn't healthy, so she stopped dating a bunch of guys, deleted all of those apps, and met Sam. He's very good looking with a great personality and an amazing job. He was smart, funny, outgoing, and can own the entire room when he walks in. He grew up in a different city, so his family doesn't live here, but we've met and they're amazing just like him. Sam quickly replaced us as mom's favorite kid and became our dad's best friend. He eventually proposed and everyone was over the moon. I was very happy for my sister. Last week, she came to my door looking like a complete wreck. She was crying so hard she couldn't talk. After an hour or so, I calmed her down enough to get the story. Apparently, they were at a party and were mingling separately when he overheard some of the guys talking about her popularity. Sam joined the group and got her dating history. 2 of the guys in that group dated her, and about 4 other guys at the party dated her too, one of whom works with him, which is why they were there. He heard about the guys laughing about how all of the men in town were depressed when she went away to college, but rejoiced when she came back. When they got home, he asked her. She told him the truth, and he left without saying a word. I helped my sister, and she's been staying with me for now. She hasn't told anyone, and has been trying to get in touch with Sam and his family, but they're all ignoring her. Everyone on our side is super confused because Sam just disappeared. Our cousin, my best friend, pinned me down the other day to ask what had happened. I told her, and she was appalled. She called him all sorts of names and insecure. I said I can understand from his view, as we live in a small town, and it's hard to know many men and your coworkers know your future wife. Then my cousin and I got into it. She said I should be supporting my sister no matter what. I argued I am supporting her, but supporting doesn't mean I have to agree with her. Now I might lose my best friend. Edit. We're all in our 30s, graduated college, and living on our own. You're the jerk, and so is your sister's ex. She deserves better. Right? Sam is not that great of a guy, apparently. Hard, you're the jerk. You sound pretty smug and judgmental. You're the jerk. From a male point of view, neither of all those guys had the quality to keep her. Every one of them happily took advantage of her, but now acts like she's to be an outcast or blamed. What a bunch of worms. Sam had lots of good qualities, but because he found out that she had a life before him, what a surprise. He leaves without a word? You defend him and put all the blame on your sister for him leaving without a word. You're the jerk. Unpopular opinion, but not the jerk. Sam has held values throughout his life that he thought his fiancée had shared throughout hers. Once he found out that she didn't, that her past had been kept secret from him, that he's been working with a guy who had her long before he did, and that he's now the laughingstock of the town for being with her, he has every right to no longer want to stay in this relationship. If you find out the person you're about to marry has actually lived a life that you never would have approved of, and that they've been hiding their past from you, you have every right to call things off. It's unfortunate how programmed you all are to be non-judgmental, as you call it. It has resulted in a generation of fools who think their actions should never have consequences. Hate to break it to you, but they do. I'm just glad Sam found out the truth before he actually married her. There are women out there who have the same values he does, and they're the ones who will deserve a man like him. Well, what do you think? Is OP the jerk or not? Please let us know.
That's the good thing about being with someone as ugly as Reddit boy. Their past dating history is basically non-existent.
Am I the jerk for wanting my daughter to meet my girlfriend despite being an absent father? I, 29 male, had a kid with my ex-wife, 32 female, 10 years ago, my daughter. And there's no real way to sugarcoat this, but as soon as she was born, I left, and I never ended up seeing her in the hospital as a baby. Was never really present in her life at any point, but ended up getting a divorce 11 months later, with her getting full custody, of course. I married young, was really stupid, and thought I'd end up being a good dad despite no skills, but got scared that I'd turn out like my dad and chickened out. Not really an excuse, but an explanation, I guess. I paid child support for the first 3 years, but stopped afterwards. I've been speaking with the girl's mother about reconnecting with her, but she thinks it's best that I stay out of their lives majorly. But I think making amends is always possible, so I'm not sure. I just really want to make things right, but I will respect their decision. I've seen her a few times, but her mother has always introduced me as a friend. She says she will tell her when she's ready. I've been dating a girl who's 28 for about 10 months, and I really like her. I think I could definitely see a life for us, and I know that sounds weird, but she's also said the same. I was also speaking to my daughter's mother about meeting this girl, but she says absolutely not, and that that's a bad idea. But if I want to reintroduce her into my life, isn't it fair that she gets to see my life too? Am I the jerk for this? Her mother says it's a very bad idea, so it's making me think I am, but I just generally cannot see why. Obviously, I care for this girl, and I will care for her life too, but a relationship has to be two-sided, and I don't think it's out of the question to show her my life too. You're the jerk for a few reasons. You paid child support for the first 3 years, but you stopped afterwards. Why? Isn't it fair that you get to introduce her into your life? Not if she doesn't even know that you're her father, and not if you are not behaving as her father. Quit being a selfish jerk and leave her alone. You can't even support her financially, but want to talk about fairness? Sounds like OP owes 7 years worth of child support before he gets any say. After that, it's still going to be a long prove it that he's serious about being in the kid's life. You're the jerk. 8 to 9 years of child support. He didn't make it the whole first year, and I doubt he actually knows how old his kid really is since he can't even pay child support. Right? We have 2 data points here. 1, this guy is completely disinterested in this kid. And 2, this guy is aware that this reflects really poorly on him. The obvious conclusion is that his only motivation here is to con this new girl into thinking he's a halfway decent person, or at least not someone who will do to her and her potential baby what he did to his ex and hers. The fact that he's clearly only interested in the kid as a human prop to deceive his girlfriend and doesn't register the emotional harm that this would do to his kid pretty solidly indicates that he likely would do it again. You're the jerk. You are not her father. You're just the donor. You paid support for 3 years, which means for 7 years, the mother has been alone, even financially. You don't get to just walk back in because you have a girlfriend you think you might be with forever. This kid is a human being whose life and feelings matter more than you and your selfish desires for making amends. Try therapy to deal with your daddy issues before marriage and having kids with this new woman. My Karen sister demands I pay off her BMW. About a year ago, my sister, G, who's 23, bought a BMW she couldn't afford. She also had a bad habit of getting expensive items for TikTok and Instagram posts. I lucked out on hitting the jackpot with my wife and job. My wife typically makes a lot more money than I do, but she's currently on bed rest with a difficult pregnancy. It has been almost 2 months. It will last the rest of the pregnancy. She has inherited aplastic anemia. While we have some savings, we live within our means with 2 paid-off cars and a nice 2-bedroom house. My dad, who speaks English as a second language, calls me upset that someone is trying to steal my sister's car. It was being repossessed for non-payment. I called my sister and asked what was going on. She first said she was 1 month behind, then admitted she was 3 months behind. She said she would have the money next week. She never called the car dealership to follow up, and the car was sold, sticking my sister with the remaining balance. Now she doesn't have a car and is driving my dad's older Jeep. I have offered my car for her to use, but it's a Toyota, and she rejected it. She's been harassing both of my parents because she says I could have lent her the money, and my wife is lazy about her pregnancy. Now I'm getting unwanted advice about getting my wife back to work since she has worked from home previously. My wife is sick. I'm already worried about her health. She's losing weight around the 6 months and isn't eating well. My sister has told me our mom had 7 kids, and my wife is milking the pregnancy for attention. At this point, I cut my sister off and stopped going to my parents' house, where she lives. A few family members think I'm the jerk for not helping my sister financially with a car that she couldn't afford in the first place. Heck hath no fury like me scorned. This story starts 31 years ago, but the revenge part was pure serendipity that began 2 years ago. I'm going to shorten most parts because it's a crazy ride, but I'll be happy to answer any questions y'all have. I learned a ton on this journey, and part of the reason for this write-up is to share that with others. The beginning. In 1990, when I was just out of middle school and my sister was still in elementary, my dad met his 3rd wife at the only gas station in our town. They soon moved in together, and he abandoned us in our old basement apartment to live in a shanty houseboat that didn't run to live with her. He would show up every other week and give me $40 for groceries. Eventually, someone figured out the situation and called my mom. We went to live with her, which was, believe it or not, worse. My dad and his shanty wife got married in 1991. Not long after, she called me and told me that my dad's brain tumor had returned. It hadn't, and that he couldn't handle the stress of being around us, that the only people he could bear to be around were her and her son, Shorty, who was my age. When I called my dad to ask if this was true, he said it wasn't, and he just couldn't believe that she would say that to begin with. That was one of our last conversations until 2 years ago. The middle. There's not much in this part. I worked my way through college, living in my car from time to time. My dad and I were no contact, but I heard from family that he had bought a house and put his son through some vocational classes. When my grandmother passed, Shorty and shanty wife showed up in a truck and took all the furniture, and anything else that wasn't tied down are already gone. Eventually, I went no contact with my dad's side of the family. I struggled for years, decades really, but I made it, and I have a great job and a good family now. The best revenge is living well, right? The pre-end warm-up. 2 years ago, October of 2019, I got a call from my dad's brother, Alan. He told me my dad was in a nursing home in another state. Great. And I needed to go see him because he needed my help. What the heck? Shorty had ghosted him. The nursing home, coincidentally, was about 20 minutes from my house, and I saw an opportunity and I went. The reunion was underwhelming. I didn't want to make amends, but I did want to hear how he wound up dumped and all alone in another state. And it was a really, really good story. Shanty wife had got lung cancer and put my dad in a nursing home before she passed in 2017. Shorty became his power of attorney when she passed and had been visiting my dad, living in my dad's house with his 2 kids, and taking care of my dad's affairs since his mom passed. But now he was MIA, and my dad was worried about him. He asked me to drive the hour and a half to his house to check on everything. That's all he wanted. He never even asked me how I had been. I agreed to go, I think out of morbid curiosity. I'd never even been to my dad's house. I did want to see where he lived with his real family for 30 years. I wanted to see what could have been my life. It was 50 shades of awful. The grass hadn't been cut all summer. You couldn't get to the front door from the overgrowth. There were 3 pickup trucks in the yard. 2 were full of trash. Cabs and beds and back seats, just trash. Mail, clothes, paper, shoes, garbage bags. I couldn't understand it. My dad's handicap-modified SUV was on 4 flats and full of garbage too. I didn't have a key, so I just walked around. From what windows I could look through, the inside was in shambles and hoarded to heck. On the front and carport doors were dozens of notices from the city that they were going to condemn the place. The carport was also hoarded. Boxes and boxes stacked on each other, most rotting from the rain. The yard was full of garbage, broken Christmas ornaments, more shoes, rusted tools, old toys. There was a letter in the mailbox notifying him that since the house was abandoned, mail would not be delivered anymore. That night, I Googled powers of attorney and how to use them. I went back the next day and showed my bedbound dad the pictures on my phone. He vowed to beat Shorty up, then asked me to help more. I told him I would, but he'd have to sign power of attorney over to me. All of it, durable, financial, and medical. If he didn't, he could figure this stuff out by himself. He agreed, so I set about finding a lawyer who would drive to another state and do the paperwork in the nursing home. Bless that lawyer for being so good at his job, because all I did was tell him what I knew, and he put together a beautifully bulletproof POA. It was full of stuff I didn't even know I would need. He also filed the paperwork to revoke Shorty's POA, and now I'm unstoppable. We're from a small rural town, and it's the kind of creepy, landlocked place that no matter how long you've been gone or how far away you've been, when you go back, you'll see someone you know. Even if you don't know, you know them. It's like playing 7 Degrees of Everybody, all the time. It's suffocating, but it can also be helpful. The beginning of the end. I got to work the next morning. I didn't know how scorched the earth would be when I finished, and I didn't want Shorty or anyone from his prolific inbred family trying to find me, so I made sure nothing I did had my name on it. I opened a Google account for my dad and got a Google number. I opened a P.O. box for him in his town. I put in a mail forwarding notice. I pulled his credit report. I took the POA to my dad's small town bank, changed the address on his accounts, and got new account numbers. I requested copies of every transaction back to the day Shanty wife had passed, about 13 months worth. I had to go to the main branch 2 hours from my house the next day to pick the records up. I sat in the lobby all afternoon going through the account. I cornered a service rep and got a crash course in his debits and deposits. This is when I figured out the extent of Shorty's staggering stupidity. My dad got about $5,000 a month in disability and Social Security every month. Twice a week, Shorty was going into a branch and withdrawing cash, all of the cash, for 13 months. And every time he did it, as the POA, he had to sign a form stating that he was acting on behalf of my dad, and that form was notarized by the bank. I went through every withdrawal and got the bank to confirm that every one of them was made by Shorty. Then I went to the house and called a locksmith. I knew it was bad, but I had no idea what was waiting for me there. He got the first door open, and the stench rolled out like a fog bank. We both gagged. 2 locks later, I was so embarrassed by what he had to see and smell, I gave him a $60 tip. And with shiny new keys in hand, I called the cops. I told them I was POA for my dad, was checking on his house, and there were 3 vehicles there that didn't belong to him. He asked me if I knew who they belonged to. I said no, and I wanted them towed. He told me to call a tow company and he would meet them there. They showed up with 2 wreckers. The tow truck guy got out and asked me for a signature. I only signed my first name. As I was signing, he asked, "Do you know Shorty?" Running on pure hatred at this point, I surprised myself. "Do you?" I asked. He said he did, and that he's a jerk. I responded, "He might be. Hey, can you do me a favor? If you see him, will you tell him MNWNM is coming for him?" His bravado evaporated. He knows a crazy when he sees one. They towed the trucks. When everyone was gone, I opened the door in the carport to peek in. The sun was going down and it was dark in the house. I heard something faint, and after some seconds realized it was the roaches and the rats doing their roach and rat stuff. I could smell it all in my hair. I sat on the carport steps and watched the sun go down. I was mad. just so cosmically livid that 72 hours was all it took to dissolve 3 decades, and here I was, stinking and listening to the rats and cleaning everyone else's crap up, taking time away from my family. And for what? I had a coming to Jesus with myself. I could either bow out now or double down. And the thing is, I'm tenacious to a fault. I had to be to survive, and this was a bone I couldn't put down. The thought of Shorty's life being upended, his only source of income, probably, disappearing literally overnight, and my dad having to hear secondhand from me that he's broke and alone made me absolutely giddy. I desperately wanted them both to lose what they had left, so I decided I was going to triple dog down. That night, I Googled restraining orders, and it was surprisingly easy to get one. I went to the courthouse in my hometown, went to the clerk's office, and told her I needed a restraining order. I filled the form in at a rickety little table while I was there. I wasn't prepared to see a judge that day, but she took the form and said, "Okay, I'll see if the judge is still here." That kind of scared me. She took me to his chambers, and as I was waiting, I looked around and saw he had certificates of appreciation hanging up from various veterans groups. Then I wiped my palms and thought, fish in a barrel. He asked about my dad's stint in the Marines and about the DoD office logo on my sweater. I'm a contractor. He read my form and granted the temporary order. I would have to go back for the permanent one where Shorty would be able to argue against it. Then I went home and Googled biohazard companies and elder treatment statutes in my state. I hired a biohazard company to shovel all the crap out of the house for $7,000. I would have paid double. They found my dad's mummified dog under some pizza boxes in the master bedroom. They sent me pictures and salvaged some papers. Shorty was served during this time and a hearing was set. I got to work collecting and documenting crap. I made pictures and spreadsheets and timelines with cross-references because now they had my full attention. The paid versions of Truthfinder and Trello seriously got me through all this. In my spare time, I went to the nursing home and gave my dad 8x10 copies of the pictures of his dead dog, from every angle. Before court, I went to the police station nearby and told them that I wanted to report an elder mistreatment crime. A white-collar detective came out and told me it was a domestic matter and that since Shorty had been POA, everything he had done was legal. And this was the day I got to teach a small-town detective about the fiduciary responsibilities of a POA. Thanks, Google. I handed him a copy of the statute with the applicable sections highlighted. Then I handed him a thick folder with bank statements, pictures of the hoarded house and the dead dog, a copy of my dad's credit report that showed he was tens and tens of thousands of dollars in debt, and a spreadsheet listing every cash withdrawal with a running total of the stolen amounts. The grand total was just over $130 in cash. That's not including the lost value of the house or the credit cards he opened and used. I told him he could keep that folder since it wasn't the only one I had. Then I told him I would wait for a case number and I sat down. He came back about 30 minutes later and apologized, said I had a case and gave me a case number. Then I headed over to the courthouse. This is the end. There were other people there and I had to wait my turn. And while I was waiting, that stupid jerk walked his sloppy self into the courtroom by himself and obviously, literally, non-metaphorically, dirty. His shoes were untied and that turned my giggle box over. Then it was our turn and we stood up. The same judge asked me some questions, asked him some questions, and asked me if I had any proof. I had a very thick folder of it. The judge asked me if I'd gone to the police. Well, yes, sir, I have. Do you have a case number? As a matter of fact, the order was granted permanently and for life, but not before the judge halted proceedings and told Shorty he needed a lawyer. Someone told me that the courthouse would have a copy of my dad's DD-214 discharge papers, so while I was there, I got a copy of those, because why not? I also used my POA to take Shanty Wife off the deed to the house. That way, if my dad passed and it went into probate, Shorty had no immediate claim. I also went and got copies of my dad's birth certificate and Shanty's wife's death certificate. Technically, stepkids can't request that kind of info, but the clerk who waited on me recognized my dad's name and told me she had hooked up with my Uncle Alan in the 60s and went to my grandparents' funeral. So I got all the forms I wanted. Shanty Wife left my dad $50,000 in life insurance. About $35,000 of that was left since Shorty was spending my dad's money and not his mom's. So I opened an Ally account and transferred every penny over. Then I set up recurring transfers for the monthly deposits. At any given time, there was no more than $100 in his account. I also found a house flipper that paid me enough for the house to pay off his mortgage. That's the thing about probate. There's nothing to fight over if there's nothing there. And I made sure there was nothing there. My dad passed thinking he still owned a house. Speaking of which, this is about the time I found my dad's life insurance policies. They were up to date and Shanty Wife was the beneficiary. My POA didn't allow me to change beneficiaries, but it allowed me to assign them. And since Shanty Wife was gone, there was technically no beneficiary. This is where the death certificates came in handy. I assigned my sister and me as beneficiaries. Irrevocable too, which means that the only way to change that is for my dad and me and my sister to agree to it. I kept my dad in the dark about all this. The only thing he ever really knew about was the restraining order and his dog. I found out that he had purchased the gravesite next to Shanty Wife and wanted to be buried next to her. That was just never going to happen. I Googled national cemeteries and found out he qualified to be in one since he was a disabled Vietnam-era veteran. So I arranged for that instead. All the cherries on top. My dad passed in June this year and I was there. He's buried in a national cemetery far away where no one will ever go visit him. The only obituary I ran was on the funeral home's website, and that only for insurance purposes. I wrote it as vague as possible. There was no service. His urn is purple, the color he hated most. I got a call in August from the prosecutor's office in my hometown. The lady on the other end is married to my first cousin because of course she is. That's how it works there. Shorty was arrested just after midnight on July 1st, was still in jail, and had been arraigned on felony elder mistreatment charges. He's facing 10 years in FPMITA prison now. She told me not to expect the trial anytime soon, as it can take up to 3 years for that to happen. I told her that was awesome, since the uncertainty will hopefully haunt him, and after all that, he's still got prison to look forward to. He lost his kids. He lost his dad. I'm spending his mom's money. He lost his free house and trucks. He has no credit and will never be able to get any sort of decent job and will, hopefully for a long time, not be able to find a decent place to live. And I sleep like a baby.
Support our channel by joining as a member today, and we'll give you a shout out in our next video.
Or come watch this video next. You won't believe what Karen does in that one.